So I'm recording my homily for the third week of Advent, and we're up somewhere near Baker Lake. It's very beautiful here. It's very peaceful. I love the snow because the snow makes it quiet. It's kind of like the spiritual life. When we're purified, when we go to God for His mercy, and He gives us back that purity, there's a quietness that comes over our life. There's a peacefulness about it. So I love that. In the readings this weekend, you have John the Baptist once again. Now John the Baptist, at this point, he's not down at the Jordan River. He's not baptizing. Now he's in prison. And so Herod is getting ready to execute him. And so John asks his disciples to ask Jesus a question. And the question is to Jesus, are you the one? Are you the one? Are you the one whom we are waiting for? Are you the Messiah? And so John's disciples go to Jesus and ask him that question. Now, that question is troubling for me because how could he not know? After everything that they had gone through. So when they were down at the Jordan River and John was down there baptizing people, and Jesus comes to him, he immediately points Jesus out and says, behold. So he's talking to his disciples. He says, behold the Lamb of God. I mean, there's no doubt there. There's no questioning. There's no, I wonder if he's the one. It's just immediate. Behold the Lamb of God. When Jesus does approach him at the river, and it's Jesus' turn to be baptized, John says to him, you should be baptizing me, not me baptizing you. And then when John finally does baptize him, you have that moment where you have God's voice from the heavens speaking, this is my beloved Son. And then you have the image of the Holy Spirit and you have Jesus. And so you have all these things going on. How could how could John forget that? Or what could have changed? We don't forget an encounter with Jesus. We just don't forget that. We forget what we had for breakfast last week, but we don't forget our encounters with Jesus. And so I think there's something deeper here with the question. I don't think this is not John forgetting what's going on, or this is some kind of a haphazard Messiah-prophet relationship. There's something very much being planned here. There's something that's organized about this from the very beginning. Just like Jesus says in the gospel this weekend. There's something very profound about John and his role. This was part of a plan, not some haphazard thing. And so if you're ever questioning your faith, if you're ever struggling with your own sinfulness or struggling with whether Jesus is working in your life, at the very least you should be able to see, hopefully with your mind and your heart, that there's a plan that's been in place since the beginning of time. Now, Jesus goes on to ask the others down at the Jordan River some questions. He says to them, they're out in the desert, and he says to them, who are you looking for? Who are you looking? Who are you seeking? Now, he's not asking the question because he doesn't know the answer. He knows the answer, but he's trying to draw out of them something deeper so that they can respond. Now, it's snowing more. All right, I better hurry. So when I was much younger, when I was a teenager, my parents had a rule, and it was a very clear rule, and there was no ambiguity to the rule. And the rule was that we were never allowed to go see an R-rated movie anywhere, whether it was on TV, in the movie theater, at our friend's house, it didn't matter. We were not allowed to see an R-rated movie. And to do so probably meant that there would be repercussions that we would not forget for a very long time. There was one summer when me and a friend, we were going to the movies a lot, and temptation overcame me, and I went to see a lot of R-rated movies that summer. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the world. I learned a lot of new words. I learned a lot of ways that we treat people that aren't very nice. I learned a lot about just the nature of violence. I learned a lot about sex too. It wasn't necessarily from the perspective that my parents would have appreciated, but I learned a lot about it. And I think every person who grows up in our culture now probably is in the same boat. I mean, if you've got cable TV in your house and you've got teenagers, they're watching things that you don't know, right? I mean, it's curiosity, and sometimes it can be even more than that. If your kids have access to the internet, they have access to anything out there, pretty much. And if your kid is smart, they can get around just about any firewall that you could put up on your internet. Now, I'm not saying that to scare you, I'm just saying that's the reality. As I was getting a little bit older, I started really questioning which path was I going to take, because the path that my parents had taught me about the faith and about right and wrong and the things that I should be doing in my life was very different than the path that the world was teaching. In fact, they were in some ways very much opposed to each other. And I remember thinking to myself how much I hoped that the path that the world offered was the right one, because it was so much easier, it was so much funner. And the other path that my parents offered many times felt like just if you could take life itself and embody it, it was almost like stickers were all over it that said, don't do this, don't touch this, don't see this, this is bad, this is bad. And so, and just following the 10 Commandments, don't do this, don't. And so because I wasn't very deep, that didn't seem very attractive to me. So I remember one day going into my dad's library. So my dad was a permanent deacon and an avid reader, and he had lots of religious books on everything, on the saints, on the church, on everything. And I remember going in there because I never went in there to read any of his books. And I was looking at the books one day because I was really wrestling with this. And it just kind of dawned on me. And so a question came to me. Have I ever trusted Jesus? Have I ever trusted him with anything? Anything profound? Any decision in my life where I wanted one thing, but I surrendered it to Jesus and I trusted him? I couldn't think of anything. And then the darkness just started to come in, and I began to realize, do I even know him? I mean, have I ever really opened my heart to him? Now, I'm a teenager at the time, right? And then the scariest question of all came to me. It was a question that nobody had ever asked me in my whole life. It wasn't until I entered the seminary that somebody pointed that out. Do I actually love him? Do I care about him? And so I pulled a book off the shelf. I don't remember what book it was, but it was one of many that I would soon start reading. And I decided that I needed to give Jesus a chance. I needed to honestly seek some answers to the doubts or the questions that I had, which I had never done before, really, on any deep level. You've all heard of Socrates, right? So Socrates was a great philosopher, Greek philosopher who lived about 400 years before Jesus. In some ways, he was contemporary because Socrates was part of the Greek culture, which was still kind of prevalent in Jesus' time. They were still speaking Greek, and the philosophies of Socrates' time would have been known by the people of Jesus' day, even though the Romans were now taking over the world. And so Socrates was just incredibly brilliant. He was so much more intelligent than the average person of his day. And it was a gift. And I'm sure he worked hard at it too, but there was just a gift there. And he knew it. And so one day, people around him started debating as to whether or not Socrates was, in fact, the most intelligent person, the wisest person they had ever met. And he kept just saying, oh, come on, you guys, stop it. Stop it. No, of course not. But then after a while, after he started, listening to them more and more, he said, you know what, maybe they're right. Maybe I am the most intelligent person in the world. And so other people said, well, okay, all right, why do you say that? If you're so smart, you got to be able to give a good reason. And he said, because of this. He says, because I'm the only one here, at least amongst the people he was debating or talking to, I'm the only one here who knows that I know nothing. So he was saying that about himself. He's saying, I'm the only one here who can admit and who knows the fact that I know nothing. See, you all think you know something, and therefore I'm smarter than you because I know I don't know anything. Incredible humility. He was very serious because the more he sought, the more he searched for answers, the more he realized how little he knew. Now, there was something very famous that came out of the time of Socrates, and it's called the Socratic method. If you've never heard of it, it's very basic. It's basically when you're interacting with somebody, when you're talking to them, and you want them to be able to give a deeper reason or you want to have a deeper conversation, you respond by asking them questions. So he would always do that because for two reasons. One was he wanted to learn. He was always seeking a deeper answer, more knowledge. And so he would get that from other people by asking them questions. It's like a little child who's constantly peppering you with questions. Little did you know your kids were using the Socratic method on you, huh? So the other reason that he would do it, though, was he discovered that if he wanted to help a person rise, if he wanted to help a person grow in wisdom, it was far more effective to ask them questions and lead them down a path where they would discover the answer for themselves, rather than just telling them the answer. I suppose it's human pride. I suppose we don't really embrace something unless we're the ones who've discovered the answer. I don't know. But you know, like when you have teenage kids, and your teenager comes to you and says, Mom, Dad, I'm not going to church anymore. You know, it's just not for me. So parents will often do one of two things. They'll say, well, okay, you're adult enough to make that decision, you know. And the parents are afraid to push, right? Because they're afraid they'll push the child out of the faith if they push them and make them do it. And so they say, okay, you're an adult enough. But that's not what the teenager is looking for, right? Teenagers test. They want to know the answer, but they do it by testing. And if the parents just roll over and play dead, it doesn't do anything to help them. Now, the other thing parents can do is they can say, well, all right, you're not going to go to church, pack your bags. Because if you're man enough or woman enough to make that decision, you're man enough to go pay your own bills, and so you're not going to live in this house. That would have been how my parents would have been. Now, the third option is the Socratic method. So your teenager comes to you and says, Mom, Dad, I'm not going to church. And so you say, why not? You say, why? I don't get anything out of it, and it's boring, and I just don't want to go. And you say, yeah, but that's not a good answer. I need a real reason. Give me a real reason. Give me a good reason. You say, well, I don't know. I guess it's just boring. It's not tying into my life. You say, well, how come? Why not? Well, I don't know. You say, well, is it because you're doubting your faith? Is it because you don't see Jesus at Mass? Is it because you're struggling with doubts? And so you see what's happening is the teenager has to go deeper. They have to produce an adult answer, a real answer. And a good parent has the ability to get down into their heart and their soul and do that, right? And so Socrates would do that. And it was powerful. The thing with Socrates, up to the very last day of his life, he was seeking. And he never got to know Jesus here on earth. But I firmly believe that the way he would seek answers and truth, he would have been just like John the Baptist, who's posing questions because he wants to help his disciples discover Jesus on a much deeper level. And so he's leading them in that manner. It's brilliant, actually. Often we portray John the Baptist as almost this raving lunatic or this fanatic. He was very smart. He knew how to draw people to Jesus, at least those who were humble enough to follow, right? We live in a time where humility is a hard thing when it comes to faith. People often put up the wall right away. And so we use the methods that can help people, that can help draw them to Jesus. Now, Jesus asks the people there a bunch of questions as well, right? Who are you seeking? Who are you seeking? Now, we just had the feast day of the Immaculate Conception. And when I was preparing my homily for that feast day, I kept asking the question to myself in prayer. It's like, God, why do we call her the Immaculate Conception? You know, why not Mary, she who was always pure or never had original sin? You know, because that's what we're implying. But why do we call her, why is her title Immaculate Conception? Why conception? Conception is an act, right? It's two people who are choosing to create another human being. That's what conception is. Two people choosing to create life. Why do we call her that? I think there's something about that that's very profound and very deep. You remember in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve? And God is with them. And there's all these moments of grace in which God has created all these beautiful things, including Adam and Eve. And then Adam and Eve are getting ready to share in that creative ability as a man and as a woman, right? The ability to conceive, physically to conceive a child, but also to conceive of love first, to conceive of a relationship. And it's in that moment when they need to trust God. They need to really trust Him on that. And Satan comes in just like the world comes into our lives and whispers things to us daily through the TV. And I don't mean you're having, visions or anything like that, but just the messages are constantly coming into us. We're being bombarded by messages that are not from God. And the messages, just like Satan in the garden, are saying, you don't need to trust God. You don't need to trust God. You don't need to choose Him. And just like the movies that I went to see when I was younger, the R-rated movies, they're full with violence and bad language and sex, but not in a wholesome manner. It's a game. It's a sport. There's nothing beautiful about it. But heaven forbid that you actually conceive a child, right? And the world will say, sex, yes, free love, yes, but conception, no, right? That's what you need, contraceptives, right? You need something that protects you from conception, from giving life. Giving life is bad. Not trusting God is good, whatever that vice is. Abortion, stopping life, stopping God from acting. The world says that's good. But really what the world is saying is, life, that's bad. You don't need life. You don't want life. You don't want to be chained down by life. And so all along when I was growing up, I thought my parents were saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And really what they were saying is, if you want life, this is what you need to do. Just like the Ten Commandments, if you want life, you need to learn how to be honest. If you want life, you need to not steal from people, to develop respect and trust. You need to not commit adultery and all those other sins. Because in order to create life, you have to create love. And yet the world never talks about love on that level. That's when the world starts, just like Satan, saying, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. That'll just hinder you. To conceive, to give life. That's what Jesus has always wanted to do. That's what God has always wanted to do. From the very beginning, He created and it was good. It was beautiful. And so we need to be part of that. Join Jesus in that. Redeem our world, right? Now at the very end of the gospel, in the middle of the gospel, John's disciples want to know, how will they know it's Jesus? He's the one. And so he says, The one that you should follow is the one who is allowing the deaf to hear. He's giving new life. Healing the blind so that they can see. He's giving new life. Healing the leper so that the leper becomes clean. He's giving new life. Healing the one who is lame so they can walk. He's giving new life. Bringing the gospel to the poor. He's giving new life. Challenge the things that the world teaches you. Challenge them. Do they give life or do they not give life? Ask the question. Go deeper. Be Socrates, right? Be John the Baptist. Because I think we'll find that the answers, I'm not perfect. There's times I make really stupid decisions, just like everybody else. But Jesus is still saying there, he's still there saying, ask the right questions, make the right decisions, and in the end, we'll be following him. All right, God bless. Take care.